So I'd like to thank Raymond for encouraging me to put my name forward for the position of the RAIC president. When an RAIC gold medalist, Order of Canada recipient, and distinguished professional honors you with this kind of advice, you don't really have a choice. And actually, Ray, I think you even told my mom that I should do this at one point. And as vice president, I've already had a chance to experience the rewards and challenges that go with helping to lead an organization like this. So I'm looking forward to the next 12 months. Great deal. I'd also like to thank Joseph for joining us here tonight. His novels really did help me to understand Northern Ontario as a place, as I was struggling to come to terms with the challenges confronting the people who call this place home. And Dr. Chris Manson, thank you for attending, and I do look forward to our ongoing collaborations with the NCC. And Douglas Cardinal, thank you as architect of this space of ceremony. And Sam, thank you for raising expectations for my performance to levels that I'm almost guaranteed to fail to meet. So I have the ceremony here in this space. It might seem odd for many of you since I'm not of Indigenous background. The year I was first elected to the board as a director for Ontario North, East, and Nunavut was the year the James Bay community of Attawapiskat was in the news due to a fire that displaced many of its residents. As this community was in the region that I represented, and as our organization advocates for excellence in the built environment, I felt I needed to understand better what was going on there, as it clearly was not anything like excellent. Although I read what I could, it was clear to me that visiting the region and speaking to community members would really be the only way I could really understand. Finding an appropriate way and time to visit took many inquiries and meetings, including then Aboriginal Affairs critic Dr. Caroline Bennett. But it's Charlie Angus, Member of Parliament for Timmins James Bay, who made a seat available for me on one of his charter flights to Saskatchewan and introduced me to the local community members. I actually still find it difficult to talk about this experience. Beyond the condition of the individual buildings, it was the needlessly harsh, austere, internment camp-like atmosphere that troubled me. As we all know, as professionals, built environments don't just happen. They're the work of trained professionals, administrators, and policymakers. It's a choice. Although it must be said, in this case, not likely one made by architects. Khalil Sharif, Executive Director of the Aga Khan Foundation, Canada, once told me that His Highness, the Aga Khan, values professional associations like ours because they represent the competencies of a nation. That's quite a responsibility. It's a powerful idea that has stuck with me ever since. So as a representative of one of these organizations that represents Canada's competency in the built environment, how does this responsibility come into play when confronted with what appears to be long-term institutionalized incompetence? I'm not referring to professional malpractice, but a more profound failure to understand or even respect the community they're attempting to serve. Out of my depth, I looked for help. Before my trip north, at a conference on Indigenous reconciliation, I spoke with one of the presenters, who's here tonight, Dr. Marilyn Poitras, a Métis law professor from the University of Saskatchewan, who has since served as a great sounding board and resource in understanding the issues at play. Also, I learned that the RAIC has among its members a small but growing cohort of Indigenous practitioners. So we formed a task force led by Patrick Stewart of the Stolo First Nation in the Lower Mainland of British Columbia, to examine ways to approach the creation of healthy and sustainable Indigenous communities. The members of this task force are uniquely qualified because of their Indigenous background and professional training to provide informed advice on how the profession and also to public policymakers on how to work more responsibly in these communities. The RAIC can use its national reach and access to media to amplify their voices. Our foundation has also established a scholarship for Indigenous students to study architecture and building technology. As architects, I think we would all agree that losing knowledge of traditional building crafts and ways of organizing space for cultural purposes can be as corrosive to a society as the loss of a spoken language. And yet, the built environment in Indigenous communities tends to be discussed in terms of housing issues and other technical matters. In my view, the problem is also the absence of cultural identity in Indigenous community plans imposed by governing authorities, and this is seldom discussed. The testimonials from the residents of Uje Bugamu, a community designed by Douglas Cardinal in collaboration with its residents, clearly demonstrates the healing power of culturally responsive architecture. Sadly, this example has never been repeated. Giving agency back to the communities themselves and incorporating cultural value in every investment made in places like this are the only way to turn places like Kashechuan and Attawapiskat into sustainable, healthy communities. And what a thrill to be quoted by your favorite author from my own writing. At a time when talk of reconciliation is growing, our profession is in a position to, and therefore obligated to, look for ways to help address injustices, not by imposing ideas, but by listening and promoting professional competencies that already exist in Indigenous communities. I hope to continue to advance this issue during my term as president and establish it as a permanent part of the Institute's advocacy agenda. So that's why we're here in this space. Of course, there are other challenges facing the country and our profession in 2016. Just one example is that after the Paris Climate Summit, it appears possible that we may be entering a period of reconciliation with the planet itself. Architects are well positioned to assist Canada to achieve its targets in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And the RAIC will be giving greater voice to thought leaders within our profession, or within our membership. The building sector is ready and able to do its part, and we need to make sure that this happens. So thank you all for coming.